Welcome, everyone, to Noob to Weeb. I am your Weeb, Matthew Roe.
And I'm your noob, David Short.
Every 2 weeks, I choose an anime that David hasn't seen.
And I've been having a disproportionate amount of nosebleeds lately.
Happens to us all, it's okay.
Okay.
This week, Handshakers, a sentient dolly zoom drenched in bleach, produced by Studio Go Hands, directed by Shingo Suzuki and Hiromitsu Kanazawa. Kanazawa also wrote it. So, David, please synopsis this first arc for us.
Sure, so for everyone else, first arc is the first 4 episodes. At least that's where we stopped. So, no spoilers past that point, but full spoilers for up to then. So, Tazuna and Koyori are fighting Break and Bind in the Ziggurat, and Tazuna has finally awakened his Nimrod, and... What's that? You're confused? Yes, so were we. They explain nothing for the first part, but we find out throughout the first episode that Tazuna Takasuki is a high school student who really likes to fix things. He finds a young comatose girl named Koyori Hakuna Matata and holds her hand. He hears a voice from God telling him that he's the special, and a scientist telling him that he can never let go of the girl's hand or else she will die. Before he knows it, he's in a fight with a dude whose girlfriend's a little too into chains and whips, and Tazuna awakens his Keyblade and knocks their asses out.
A Cogblade.
Yeah, well, details. We're all informed that there is a group of people called handshakers that fight in a realm called the Ziggurat, with weapons called Nimrods. The pairs each get a charge by holding hands, except for Koyori, who will literally die if she loses her charge. So now Tazuna has to live, sleep, and even bathe with this silent, dead-eyed girl until he can defeat all the other handshakers and get a wish from God. Probably. Next 2 episodes introduce a pair of handshakers named Chizuru and Hayate. One is a practical businesswoman in the body of a lolly, and the other one is a man who cannot stop scratching the back of his head. They meet our heroes, befriend our heroes, fight our heroes, lose to our heroes, and pledge to help our heroes from then on. That's Handshakers Arc 1, or Arcs 1 and 2, depending on how you want to split it.
So, David, all right, the first 2 things that we have to talk about immediately off the bat is the story itself and the way that this is visually given to us.
Yeah.
So, the first episode is extremely vertigo-inducing.
Yes.
Because of how, everything's all whip panning. It's an extremely distorted visual representation.
Yes.
Do you think that is the main reason we didn't really understand a lot of what was going on in the first episode? Or do you think it was in combination? Because stories starting in the middle of something and then jumping back to the beginning is extremely common, especially in anime. But the difference being, do you think that even if the visuals were something that was more conventionally able for us to absorb, do you think that would have helped it, or do you think that the story itself is still not exactly great when it came down to setting up the universe?
As long as you are going to watch the entirety of the first 2 episodes, you get plenty of info to understand it.
But first episode only.
The first episode only, it is literally just the eye catch. It's just like, hey, does this look good to you? We'll explain why it's working later. But there is nothing in the first episode that explains what's happening, to the point where the main character is even like, what's happening? I don't understand. And it's like, yeah, we're with you, buddy. We got nothing.
I think that's one of the major problems with the opening episode in particular, because the opening episode is almost entirely all action.
Yeah.
And we're given absolutely no context, and the only context we're given is extremely fast, because that scene where he's fixing the MP3 player of Boobs McKenzie, that's pretty much the only foundation we have for his character. And we're giving absolutely nothing with Koyori.
Right.
Because I'm just trying to think about the first episode, because when you have the first episode, everyone always does like the 3-episode test and all that jazz. I always say that the first episode is the most important one, because it's the thing that hooks you.
Right.
The first 3 episodes set up everything about the series, so by that point, if you're not interested, or if it's starting to go downhill, then of course you're going to probably get lost, or whatever it might happen to be. But this you could see the budget that got thrown into this.
Oh my god!
Like,
yes.
oh my god, I've never seen so much money thrown into the opening episode of any anime. Honestly,
I think we briefly talked about it in My Hero. The animation was always pretty fluid. They didn't really do like any particular parts where it stopped,
Yeah.
and it was just like the lip flaps moving or whatever.
Yeah.
This is that up to a fucking billion.
Yeah.
Where like the backgrounds are all unique, all of the background characters are all unique. The camera can't sit still.
everything is animated and moving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is ridiculously just constantly moving all over the place to the point where there are shots where, and it's not just like a slow pan up the character as he's talking or something like that. It's like a full 360 shot as they're walking down a hallway. It's insane the amount of effort that went into the most basic shots, which I think would normally be regarded as a good thing. But when you also have to set up this entirely new concept of handshakers, Nimrods, the ziggurat, all that sort of stuff, you get lost in the shuffle.
You do. You absolutely do. And I think one of the major problems that this show has right off the bat is the fact that the first episode is all action. And the second episode is all exposition dumping.
I mean, each one has a little bit of the other in it. Like that,
It does.
that part you were talking about with, what's her name, Booze McKenzie.
Yeah.
Was pretty much just them sitting there at a desk fiddling with the MP3 player. There was no action there. But everything after the moment where he holds Koyori's hand for the first time is just pretty much nonstop. Like, all right, you did it. Well, time to go. You're now the guy who's going to be killing people. It's like, wait, why? But then when the second episode kicks in, after he defeats, was it Break and Bind, I believe?
Yeah.
After he defeats them, that's when it's like, okay, now let me explain. It's like, oh, thanks.
I don't really enjoy the way that they broke up these particular aspects of it, because you're throwing so many terms and so many concepts at us in the first episode with no context. We didn't have enough time in the regular world before everything got thrown out of whack and they got thrown into the ziggurat. I think it was like maybe 5-8 minutes until...
It was short. It was definitely short.
It was extremely short. So I had no chance to connect with Tazuna in any particular fashion. I don't care about him. and it's not necessarily his fault. I don't necessarily consider him to be a bad character. I consider him to be a very stock standard character.
Yeah, we don't really know anything about him going into that first episode, except for the fact that he is a tinkerer and is able to fix things. Like, that's pretty much his entirety of his character. That, and he's also very caring, I guess you would say, in that he doesn't really take money for the odd jobs he does, unless it's like, something big. For the most part, he just does this stuff because he's a good person.
We never really get a chance. Okay, he is a tinkerer, and he's got a kind of a meticulous mind. Okay, I'll give him that. But that isn't his personality entirely. Just because you are meticulous does not mean that is your sole character trait. Think about Deku from My Hero Acca. If we just jumped into his story right as he was already a teenager and we just saw him running around taking notes of all the heroes and all that kind of stuff, we'd be like, okay, he's totally just a fanboy. But because we had that opening setup of when he was a kid, and all of his his hopes being dashed and all that kind of stuff, we have a full understanding of why he is that particularly driven to get these details, to know this information.
Which I do want to be clear is the episode does open with him just running around getting notes, and
it does.
But the thing is that we get the information after after maybe, I don't know, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Would you say? Into the first episode, that's when we get like okay, here it is. We don't have time to be confused because we get the backstory.
Exactly.
I also think that it comes down to be a problem of we don't know anything negative about him. That's nothing that's separating him from basically the equivalent of like a Mary Sue at this point. We have no bad aspects to him at all.
Yeah, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
It makes him very flat.
Yes, exactly.
I think that's one of the major problems that you have with some of these protagonists, where they are as blank slate as possible to allow people who think that the visual style is really interesting to kind of vicariously experience this.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, that's hentai logic. So, like, I don't like I understand that being in hentai. I don't appreciate that being in regular anime because, unlike in hentai, where it's an exploitable element, what is the main exploitable element in this show, do you think? Does it even have one, really? I think that its visual style is its driving influence because even though I think that it's a fucking mess, story-wise, visual-wise, for a lot of it, still, the color palette is really vivid. It's stark. It's something that I haven't seen.
Oh, yeah, no. When we say that, like, you know, it gives us motion sickness from how much it's moving around and a lot of stuff, while that may be true, any individual frame of this is absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, yeah. And I'm surprised there was so much funding dropped into this series because as a concept, it's very odd.
Oh, yeah.
And it's odd by even most anime standards.
It strikes me as one of those stories where it's, you know, you got the teenager who's something special about him and he has to, you know, kind of fish out of water in that he's dropped into this world.
Yeah. And it's good. We need that.
Yeah. But it almost goes back to, like, I would even say Sailor Moon would be one of the earliest anime examples I could think of someone, a teenager who's just given a immense amount of power. Just like, all right, go save the world.
I want to take a moment because one of the guys who directed this, what was it, Shingo Suzuki, you know, I pulled up his Anime News Network page and whatnot. I was giving a look at what he's done, and he's been involved in a bunch of shit. Some of the stuff that I actually really like, because he was like in Samurai 7, Read or Die, Trinity Blood, and then also Kanazawa also worked on Black Lagoon, and it's an amazing show. And I'm just like, looking at all this, I'm like, there is talent here. If I'm going down the roster of people who are involved in this, there is definitely people who have talent. It's a very small staff. This for the amount of money that was pumped into this, there was a very few amount of people that actually did this show, which I think is really interesting. So when it comes down to what you think that their intent is and what they've actually been able to accomplish in the first arc of the series, does this really solidify its world, or do you think that there's way too many moving pieces that they're so excited with the world that they're trying to build that they don't actually know how to employ it properly?
I think...
See, I'm kind of on the fence with this.
Yeah, I think that as the series progresses, it's going to get more and more solidified in its rules. Because right now, like even in those second two episodes where they fight Chizuru and Hayate, when they're fighting those two, she's still spouting off like rules that we were unaware of.
Yeah.
As the audience and him as the main character. So I feel like that's going to be the sort of thing where they start off with a really broad sort of, okay, all you have to do is hold hands and beat the enemy. But then they're going to introduce more and more aspects that narrow it down into a smaller and smaller, like, okay, but there is this that's stopping this main thing, or there's this that's causing this thing to happen. I think that by the time that you get to probably 3/4 through the series, halfway through the series, you're going to get pretty boiled down to, like, here are the exact rules of the world. But within these first couple episodes, it's a free-for-all of just like, okay, like we were even commenting, they specifically say, episode 1, you cannot ever let go of her hand.
Yeah.
And then in episode 2, several times, he just lets go and immediately grabs back on. But it's like, okay, but why didn't that break the rules? We are told explicitly, never let go.
I think he does say at one point beforehand, before he does let go of her hand and all that stuff in episode 2 from the doctor guy, that, you know, it doesn't have to, it's not instantaneous.
Oh yeah, no, they say that when they're describing the charge, they say that it's like, oh, but she's special, and if she ever runs out of her charge.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so the charge is obviously built up, but we have no idea of an audience of how fast does the charge deplete? How fast does it grow back? There's no... Because they even say, I think it's in the beginning of the 3rd episode, I was like, oh, she's able to be up to 15 minutes now without needing to hold your hand. It's like, okay, how do you know that? How do you know that 15 minutes is the limit? Because theoretically, if you say that's the limit, that means that you went past that point and she started to die.
Yeah.
You say 15 minutes is the limit, but why is 15 minutes the limit? And more importantly, at the beginning, before they did any testing, it seems like, how did you know that the limit wasn't 45 milliseconds?
Yeah. And honestly, like, and that brings me back to the doctor character. What's his name?
Makihara.
Okay, so Makihara, in the exposition episode of the second one, he just dumps all of this information on them, even though he does not say where he got it, how he came into contact with Koyori in the first place. Now, of course, if these are all mysteries to be solved later in the show, that's one thing, but we're still not given enough context. It's like, how do you know about the ziggurat?
Yeah.
Are you a handshaker? Like, what is your connection with this? And for a character like Tazuna, who he's supposed to be meticulous, he's supposed to be obsessed with the details and all that stuff, and he doesn't ask those questions.
No, he very much just like hand waves a lot of stuff away, where he's just like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. No, keep asking questions.
He's curious only enough in which that we're given enough information to be surprised by a new mechanic in the next episode.
I think that's a lot of the reason why a lot of shonen anime and like these fighting animes with these sort of rules, like where they introduce the world, a lot of the main characters are like the kid who doesn't do that well in school. So that way they can excuse why he doesn't know this thing that he obviously should have asked if he was even a halfway intelligent person.
Yeah. And you have like the two sides of this, really, because you have the one character who is not very good at what they do. They're kind of like fumbling their way through it, and that's one thing too. Like his first fight, he didn't win because of skill or because of tactics or whatnot. He just won by accident.
Yeah,
and he kind of did that in the second fight too.
Well, that was a whole thing in the second fight, was that the girl literally says like, "Oh, he has such power." How? He has done nothing that shows that he is extremely powerful in any way. You just say he's powerful.
Yeah, and then you have on the opposite side where the characters are so extremely overpowered for whatever reason, like Kirito in Sword Art Online. He's extremely overpowered because he's extremely high level, and none of this makes any fucking sense. You have this here where Tazuna is supposed to be a very smart kid. Like, he keeps going around doing things, and he's a little absent-minded, a little scatterbrained.
Oh, yeah, he's constantly missing things like appointments.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily because he's, like, dozing off or fucking around and not doing anything. He's because he's constantly fixing things. He's constantly working his mind.
He's very into whatever the thing he's doing right now is.
Yeah, but we never get that brought into the ziggurat. Him as a character is never brought into the ziggurat. He's just given a giant blade made out of cogs. He's like, okay, hit him.
Yeah,
and that isn't enough. Like, to also set the stage for everybody else is that we watched the dub of Handshakers. We did not watch the sub.
Yes, we watched about 30 seconds of the sub before we realized that between all the camera movements, we were not going to be able to focus on the subtitles.
Yeah, we weren't going to be able to read it. And I think that's one of the reasons why when I first watched Handshakers, because I watched the first, I think, 2 or 3 episodes before. One of the reasons why I was so confused is because it was only the subs were released at that point. So, and of course, I don't speak Japanese.
What?
So I can't. Jumping back and forth with a anime that's extremely visual. At least initially, because like the first episode gives the impression that this is a very, very visual series. Even the dialogue scenes, between him and Lily, that's her name, the Boobs McKenzie honor student.
I genuinely had no idea who you were talking about.
She's the tarot card girl,
right?
It's like, but I mean, I will say, I like the character designs in this. I think they're really interesting, even though, Lily's way too fucking top-heavy.
Well, I think we made the comment that episode 2 or episode 3, she came back again.
Yeah.
And she pulled another tarot card, and we genuinely didn't think it was her because she wasn't as top-heavy the next time around.
And the way that they do the hair color, it's always on a gradient.
Yes.
And it's not consistent.
It's always on a gradient, But then in the ziggurat, there's a filter put over top that makes everything a bit more purplish, or depending on your character, I think it even alters like what the color is.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be in the ziggurat. Like when Chizuru, when she was introduced, and when they did this tilt up her body up to her face, you can see how the gradient went with it. So that's not how her hair naturally looks. It's definitely something they're visually doing with the shot. So as a result of that, some of the people's faces, like we said, you had said before with Lily, that it's really hard to describe because it's a combination that I like the style, but at the same time, the style inhibits my ability to fully follow the story.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of thing of it's nowhere near as far, but it's almost experimental sort of like films and stuff.
Absolutely.
Where it's, okay, you're telling a story, but you're putting so much art over top of it that the story gets a little bit muddled along the way, or extremely muddled in some cases. This one, I wouldn't say that the story is particularly harmed in any particular way, but just little bits of understanding. Like if you have two girls who look kind of similar, and then you're going to apply a whole bunch of filters and stuff on top of it, then we might get confused which girl is which.
Yeah.
And I think our main characters, at this point at least, are unique enough that other characters don't really blend into them that much.
True.
Like we can always, for the most part, tell where our main characters are. But Lily definitely seemed like she wasn't going to be a recurring character.
Yeah.
I think after episode 1, we more or less wrote her out of our mind. So when she returned, like there was nothing that was like sparking for us.
Yeah.
Especially there weren't two enormous things sparking it for us.
And it's when she pulled out the tarot card that I realized she was the same character.
Yeah. Then we're like, oh, it's her, because how many? That's a character trait. That's not a physical aspect to her.
So we went through characters. We went through moments that kind of stuck out. Do you think that we are actually going anywhere? Or do you think that this is just kind of a running around until we eventually hit any major antagonist? Or do you think this is actually going to have an overall arc? Is this just going to be a battle royale type situation throughout the entire thing? And I'm talking about battle royale like the game and not the movie and the manga, because that actually has a story.
This strikes me as a series-long tournament arc. It strikes me as it's just going to be, all right, the next 2-3 episodes are going to be focused on them fighting this person. Then the next 2-3 episodes are going to be focused on them fighting this person. Until finally, maybe in the last 4 episodes, 3 episodes maybe, it's going to focus on the biggest threat they've ever had, leading into their wish from God. That's how it strikes me as. And the fact that I know for certain that this is a completed series definitely leads me to believe more of the aspect of they will have their final battle. It's not just going to be a sort of thing where it's a cliffhanger being but turns out there are handshakers all around the globe and you have to fight every last one.
Can we also say the fact that I fucking hate the term handshakers? I think it's one of the stupidest things about
Go back
this.
and listen to my recap of the plot, and you can hear my disdain for all the words they choose to describe their special things.
They're trying so hard to be unique.
Handshakers and the ziggurat with their Nimrod. Guys, stop it.
And to be fair, the studio Go Hands, this isn't the first production that they've done. They have been involved in stuff since about 2009. But this is trying really, really hard to be its own thing. It's not based off of a manga. It's its own original idea, and I do respect that.
The only way that this could be adapted into a manga is if every single panel was mounted on top of one of those like life spinner circles, so you could just spin the entire panel.
And that's the thing, like, I really honestly, there was, especially when I saw the previews for this, I really honestly wanted to see this series.
I think I was around when you first saw the preview for this, and you were genuinely interested in it.
Yeah, I mean, it has such a unique visual style. I didn't really fall in love with the concept, and I still am not. I don't think it's a very strong central theme for a series to carry it through, 12 episodes. I know that there's a sequel series, Wiz, or Wiz, that was released January of this year, but I don't know anything about that. I know less about that than I know about this.
Right.
As much as it's going to be a battle royale anime, I think you're completely right that that's exactly where the whole series is going to go. It has to mount expectations. I don't feel like the story is going anywhere, even though I know what the end goal is.
I think that the story is just going to be I know that it's a bad comparison for present company, but a Bleach sort of thing.
It is.
Where it's going to be you have reached a person that you cannot beat with your current skill set. As such, something new happens, you unlock a new ability, you beat the current person, repeat 7 times, end of series.
And that's the problem that I have with the first couple of episodes here, is the fact that Tazuna does not overcome a challenge to beat these guys. He kind of stumbles into it, like I said earlier.
He does. I will count credit, at least the enemies believe that he came up with a strategy to lead them to a place that he would have a better shot of beating their shadow clone jutsu.
and to a point, yeah, that's true. But I don't buy it. I think it's because he's not making enough mistakes.
I think it's also because we get nothing from his perspective for the most part. If you really think back to that entire fight, a lot of like the inner monologue stuff was from the enemies. Saying
yeah, that's true.
Oh, we're doing this, we're doing that. The most we got from his side being like, oh, this is bad, but I have to protect Koyori.
Protect Koyori. This is the only motivation. And
yeah,
it's only his only motivation just because he was put into this situation.
I think so far one of the biggest things is that he has been a very passive protagonist.
Yeah.
He's pulled into the ziggurat against his will. He's pulled into these fights against his will.
And that's not bad.
That's not bad, but at the same time, he's not making any choices that define any characteristics about him.
And that leads directly into the fact that the plot itself isn't really progressing all that much.
No.
You know, I'm not even talking about 3-act structure, just basic story structure. The first plot point always begins when a decision is made either for the main character or by the main character.
Right.
But Tazuna, he doesn't decide to do anything. The only decision he's made is to say, okay, I'm not going to let go of her hand.
Right.
And that is a decision that is continuing his progression in the story, but he himself is just wandering around doing random shit until eventually somebody else finds him.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that that's his whole thing. Is like, we don't want to fight. We're not really interested in this, involved in this. And that's the problem. He has no motivations other than just keeping Koyori alive.
I'm wondering if Chizuru and Hayate, because they make very clear, as does Break and Bind at the beginning, that the entire point of the handshakers is the tournament, to battle each other until one of you is defeated. That is the entire point of it.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if, now that they've joined the team at the end of episode 4, if they will manage to get that through his skull. That like, okay, you don't want to fight, too fucking bad.
Yeah. Like, and and the problem is he's not evolving as a result of that. He's not saying like, okay, like I there is no way out of this. I have to dive into it. I have to make this work. It's really funny. My mind keeps flashing back. It's called Eden of the East.
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
The main character, has amnesia. He completely doesn't understand, why he's able to do the things that he is, but he rolls with it, and he doesn't accept the game that he's involved with particularly well, but his character is able to evolve and adapt and rolls with the story, in which that it makes me interested to see how he's going to respond to the next challenge, where there's parts of it that he is a passive character with certain aspects where he's not necessarily looking for trouble, but he is looking for answers. And we do not have that in Handshakers. The only person who's looking for answers, quote unquote, is Makihara. And even then, he just constantly keeps saying, oh, I'm researching the truth behind Handshakers, but he's not actually doing anything except leering at Koyori when he's giving her a checkup, because that looked really kind of really kind of pedo.
That was a little bit fucked up.
Yeah. There's something else going on there. I know that there's something else, that there's more details to be revealed about him, but
there better
still.
be, because if it's only what we have seen, it's a pretty bare bones character of just like the Professor Oak.
Dude, even Professor Oak has more active relation to the plot than this guy does.
Yeah, fair. But the one line I wanted to bring up from him that both me and you found hilarious was after it was revealed, I can't even remember what fact was revealed by Chizuru to Tazuna. She looked over at Makihara and was just like, "You didn't tell him?" He's like, "Well, I was going to, but I didn't." And we were just like, "Bravo, Makihara."
That was a pretty good line, Reed.
That was a good line.
The actor for Makihara, Anthony Bowling,
Okay.
great line read, dude. Anthony,
Yeah.
great line read. You made it. You made the best of a bad situation here.
I don't feel like voice acting wise, any character is in the dub. In the dub,
Yeah.
Go ahead and hit me all you want, you purists. But in the dub, I don't feel like any particular one character was like, is that really what we're going with here? I felt like all the characters were pretty natural. No one stood out from their bodies that much. It was all pretty natural. The only thing I think is a cultural thing and might sound better in Japanese is Hayate's character is profusely apologetic.
Yeah.
And I feel like in Japanese, that's more common than in English. And I feel like in speech pattern wise, it might make it easier to deal with. But in English, dear God, I was starting to hate the word sorry. It was a terrible fucking time.
I will say that scene between Chizuru and Hayate in the car
After they've been beaten.
Yeah, after they've been beaten, when they've been when they're crying and whatnot, like the whole lead up is like emotional, and I'm like, okay, I'm with this for the most part. I was with the scene, and then when Hayate just flips out and everything turns comedic, I'm like, I actually was okay with that. I actually really enjoyed that scene.
I was totally fine with that. I thought that was a great setup scene.
Yeah.
But it also had the added benefit of Chizuru was breaking down and crying over the fact they're not going to get their one wish, and they lost their handshaker access to the ziggurat or whatever the hell they actually ended up losing.
Yeah. They're not going to get their god wish.
Hayate's forced to play, the calm, emotionless one compared to Chizuru's emotional one. So he's playing it totally calm and straight, and he's not apologizing or anything like that, until finally it cuts to his face and you just see tears are streaming down. He can't see the road at all, and he's about to crash the car.
Yeah.
It's just a good juxtaposition between those two shots.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. Like, I think that both Chizuru and Hayate are far more developed characters. That's the reason why we like them more, because we have been with them. We see what they have to do, how they interact with each other in the world. We see how they interact with the world around them, and we see how they handle how all of these interactions are handled. These guys are supposed to be supporting cast, and I would much rather see them be the main characters of this rather than Tazuna and Koyori.
Yeah, I think it's mainly because of the fact that they don't have bland protagonist syndrome. Like, both of the protagonists have to be a little bit blank slate-ish just so people can relate to them. I mean, I don't relate to Hayate in any way whatsoever.
No.
But I find him an enjoyable character just because of how he interacts with other people. That doesn't make him a particularly great protagonist. It makes him a good character, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think that's the biggest problem of the whole structure of, like, writing the anime protagonist is just, okay, let's try to make people see themselves in these sorts of heroes, and you have emotions that are common to everybody, like feeling like an outcast or feeling whatever else.
Yeah, I mean, this is also directed toward high school students.
Yeah.
That's the primary demographic of this show,
Exactly.
of course.
I couldn't tell by the bathroom bathing scene. Fucking perverts.
I know, exactly, right? But I would think, like, if I was back in high school, because when I was back in high school, I was obsessed with shonen. We always have, you always see the conversations online and everything like that. It's like, oh, this shonen is shit. These shonens were great. I'm like, nah, there's equal amounts of shit and great at the same time. But I think that my hunger for unique shonen series I probably would have looked at this and be like, yo, this is great. This is amazing. I love everything about this.
Definitely.
And there are parts of this that I genuinely did enjoy. So I'm not like some of the people who have completely lambasted this series to the point of no end, in which that like, there's nothing that's redeemable about this show. I don't agree with that. I think that there's a lot of really creative ideas and a lot of risk-taking that they decided to really go out on a limb for. I don't think it works so far. Like, if anybody decided that they wanted to say, oh, we definitely want to hear you talk about the next arc of Handshakers, that'd be one thing, but I don't feel a desire to continue on with the show.
Yeah.
Beyond simply just like, okay, well, I'll see how they'll weirdly create another 3D, 2D fight scene. It's like, but so if we have to give this first arc a rating on a scale of 5 stars, so David, what would you give this first arc?
I enjoy the visual attempt. I don't know how I like how it came off entirely 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Because some of those fight scenes were just a little too much. But it felt like it was started. Like, I felt like the first episode was the worst of it.
Which is supposed to be the hook. It's supposed to be like, this is the best we can do, and that's the thing that puts you off the most.
But it was overdone. It wasn't that it was done differently.
If it was toned down a little bit, it would have been a lot better.
Yeah.
I would have been like, okay, I'm with this, I'm confused, but I'm with this.
Yeah. When it comes down to the story itself, I mean, like I said, it's just going to be one of those Battle Royale tournament arcs. I doubt it's going to go throw anything big at us, and at this point, that's all it's promised. So even then, I don't feel like I'd be misled if that's all they did. Mm-hmm. So when it comes down to story and visuals and everything like that, I would probably go ahead and give this 2.5 stars.
Okay.
In that, if 3 stars is me just telling people, hey, go on, check it out, do whatever, and 2 stars is I'm not interested in it, like, I'm not hating it, I'm just not interested in it.
Yeah.
Then I'd put this smack dab in the middle, where I enjoyed enough of it that, like, I didn't think my time was wasted, but I wouldn't go out and tell everybody, like, yeah, no, you should definitely watch this. It's got something for you. I mean, it might not. I fully understand where people are coming down on the hating it side.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm not, and I think that its awesomeness in visuals is a little bit too much, to the point where it starts to wrap back around. But if you're into that sort of thing, great. If you're not, I get it. So all in all, I'd give it 2.5 straight middle of the road material for me.
I agree. 2.5 is kind of like, watch it once. Like a 3 is like a rental. Like I would say you go out and watch this.
I definitely say if you're going to watch it, you got to watch the first 2 as a pair.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't judge it solely based off the first episode.
And you can't really watch as a 3-episode test, because as we discovered, that the 3rd episode ends in the middle of a fight, or like the beginning of the fight or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that the way that they get fights out of the way extremely quickly. They don't do the common shonen thing where they waste like 3-4 episodes on a fight. And that isn't necessarily a good or a bad thing. It's just something that I appreciated, that even as crazy and over the top as the visuals get in the fights, it's like a roller coaster ride. It's a lot of adrenaline really quickly, and it's done really fast as well.
I think you answered your own question there of the reason that they don't stretch the fights for several episodes is because the budget just would not be able to handle that.
That is absolutely true. And you can see also with some of the expositing scenes, because this is not separated between the ziggurat and the real world. This is separated between the fighting and the expositing. That's all that there is. I don't really, there's not really much anything else to get out of the story.
I'd say like once per episode you might have the character beat, like the whole bathing scene.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't really exposit anything, but at the same time it was just like, oh, look at these characters interact.
And it also doesn't explain the characters any further. It's like, okay, here's an awkward scene between 2 teenagers, and one of them is completely unresponsive.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you anything to go off of. There's no chemistry that happens between these guys, and I think that's
maybe it grows over the course of the episodes, but what we've seen so far, it's been a very one-sided relationship that doesn't seem based off of any sort of love for the person, just love for a person not dying.
Yeah. And you compare this to other series where it's a heady series with a lot of stuff in it. Like, look at My Hero Acca. Like, it gives you a lot of exposition, a lot of world building in a very quick succession within the first couple of episodes, but it makes it easily digestible. One of the best examples, I think, is Death Note, where the entire setup of the world, the rules, and who Light and who Ryuk are is pretty much all established in the first episode. It doesn't even have to take place over the first 3 episodes of the show. You know everything that there is to know about everybody. And you know exactly what the motivations are. You understand the emotions that they have in it. And over the course of the next couple of episodes, it fully contextualizes everything. But it doesn't exposit it either. That's the one thing. It flashes back. It shows you more. Now, that isn't to say that flashbacks and pre-existing exposition is not given to Kazuna, because there is. You know, it's his whole flashbacks with his younger sister who died. So that's why he's afraid of letting go of Koyori's hand, but I think that's so fucking trite. It's really cheap. It's really lazy. It's a contrivance.
If it comes back in a bigger way towards the end, like if it actually ties back in, it's not just him remembering it more.
Yeah, but I don't think it's going to.
My biggest reason I agree with that is the fact the girl has met the mother and the father of Tazuna.
Yeah.
And there was one shot that was like, oh yeah, we had a daughter. Which was them looking at a picture frame with the daughter in it, being like, just like old times, huh? And that was it. That was the most we got, saying that, like...
Well, we had a flashback with her, like, in the hospital bed.
I'm saying, like, from the parents' perspective.
Oh, for the parents, yes, yeah.
Like, that's the sort of thing that makes me think that the daughter thing isn't that big of a part, because you would think that for the first time since their daughter died... A new girl, a young girl, has entered this house. That would be a bigger deal, but it isn't.
No, it's not. And also, like, it's really... I actually kind of find it a little weird, the way that they went about that, because they constantly play up the girlfriend kind of aspect between Tazuna and Koyori, and there's obviously a sexual tension there, of course, with, like, the fucking bathing scene and all that stuff, with the blood running into the drain, and common anime tropes.
I want to be clear, the blood running into the drain is from a nosebleed.
Yeah, but nothing about their relationship expands in those scenes. We don't learn anything new about these characters. We don't learn how they handle certain situations. Tazuna just kind of... He doesn't roll with the punches in a way that he's always adapting to his environment. He rolls with the punches because he is a passive character, and he just goes along with whoever the dominant personality is. So if he gets sucked into the ziggurat, it's not like because, we have to defend ourselves and stuff like that. He's like, oh, well, here we go again. And I think that's the most central problem that I have with Handshakers, is the fact that Tazuna as a character is boring. I don't care about his motivations because he doesn't have any. And Koyori is simply the waifu character of this and whatnot. It's like, I don't... And maybe she'll have more personality later on. I think that she's literally there to be a really beautiful character design right now. That's all the purpose that she's serving. She is a mechanic. If anything, she's a prop. She is a plot mechanic in order to constantly put Tazuna back into the ziggurat against all these other teams. Other than that, she has not done anything else. She's just a plot device. That's pretty much everything that I would have to say in a nutshell. Could you think of anything else to say?
No, I mean that's basically where I fall down too. I'm a little bit less on Tazuna and them just because I feel like it's one of those things that is going to develop over the course of the series.
It might be, yeah, but there's not enough interest there.
No, not at all. And I feel like the very first shot I think of the entire show is of Break and Bind, which are two completely inconsequential characters.
Yeah, we don't see them again,
but far more personality to them than Tazuna or Koyori.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the sort of thing where the protagonist is pretty bland, but the show is introducing so many different side characters with so many diverse personalities that it's more of a entire character roster is what you're coming for, not just the two main leads.
No, I agree. And so so we're just going to scoot into the ending here.
Yeah. 2.5 stars for anyone who skipped to the end.
Yeah,
That's what
2.5
we gave it.
stars across the board for both of us. It's worth a watch for the curious people, but just stop whenever. So everyone, thank you for listening. What do y'all think of Handshakers? If you want us to continue with the next arc of the series, we have talked a lot about it, but let us know in the comments, along with any other anime we should cover. All our socials and our Patreon are beneath this video, and we'll catch you next time when we'll be discussing, quite possibly, one of the most beloved properties in anime, the 2012 incarnation of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
You said beloved? I can't say I've ever heard of it.
David, the memes. Beware the memes.
Made possible by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.